well, yeah, I was upset at the time that I wasn't getting as much playing time, but because I wasn't getting as much playing time, because I was on the bench, which led me to kind of just see the game more. Like my whole thing was, all right, if I'm going to be on the bench, well, I'm going to study the scouting report and then share that with my teammates. Well, looking back on it, I realized now like that was preparing me to become a coach.
Hello and welcome to season 2 of the Dear Young Athlete podcast, where we talk to athletes and coaches about their journeys and what advice they would have for a younger version of themselves. I'm your host, Jacob Thompson. You can call me JT. If you want to hear my story and why I do this podcast, that will be in season 1, episode 1. But enough about me. Let's meet our guest. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, the man that I'm speaking with today. He is a former collegiate basketball player. He's a current head varsity basketball coach. He's had an awesome career that we'll get into. But above all that, he's a man of God. And I know what he shares today is going to inspire us, encourage us, and challenge us. So without further ado, Robbie Whitney. Robbie,
Awesome.
How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. Thank you for having me on. Really excited to jump on the podcast here. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. I've been looking forward to it. So, Robbie, you're head coach, you play college basketball, high school football, you've had some awards and things that we'll talk about. But where did it all begin for you? How'd you fall in love with sports?
Yeah, man, it's hard to even pinpoint where it all began just because I've always grown up just loving sports. Growing up in the just playing literally every sport with my dad. I think it was from basketball to baseball, soccer, football, street hockey. I was always too scared to go skating because I never wanted to push the chair. So I never really learned how to play hockey on the ice, but I love playing like street hockey. But yeah, so I mean, from 3, 4, 5 years old, I just remember running outside, playing sports all day, coming in, taking a nap, going right back outside, playing sports. So yeah, it's since the beginning of time, basically for me.
I love it. I love it. It's fun how some things just are natural love for the game. So at what point do you sort of focus in on certain sports and it becomes more serious for you?
Yeah. So I think, I tried to play, basically I was trying to play sports all the way, like every single sport I wanted to play all the way growing up. I was playing baseball, basketball and football, I think it was from 5th grade all the way through, or maybe even 4th grade, all the way through 8th grade. And then I got to high school and baseball just wasn't my thing. I wasn't a great hitter. I thought I was a decent field and first baseman, but I just could not hit the ball very well. And it wasn't something I necessarily loved. So I decided to do track instead. But I think it was once I got to, I want to say it was around 9th grade is really when I started focusing on basketball. I just love the sport so much. And my 8th grade year, actually, I was hoping to get pulled up to the 9th grade team, the freshman team. That was, something that was a goal of mine. And I didn't get that. There's 2 other guys who are my age that got pulled up. And at that point, I kind of realized I got to put some effort into this. I got to put some work into it. I'm not exactly the most athletic guy on the court, not the tallest guy, the quickest guy. So I'm going to really have to commit to this if I want to be a really good high school basketball player. So yeah, I guess it was around 8th or 9th grade is really when I started to dive into basketball. And then I would say even more my junior year or going into my junior year, that was when I was kind of in between the JV varsity level. And we had just lost that summer, we had just lost a bunch of seniors, really good senior class. So there's a ton of openings on the varsity team. And I just committed myself that whole summer to just get in the gym, get a bunch of shots up, work on my game. And so that was kind of like the 2 steps there. I would say 8th, 9th grade is really when I took it seriously. And then going into my junior year is when I really committed myself into my craft.
I love that eighth grade story because you're kind of faced with the choice right
Hmm.
there. You know, you're disappointed, you don't get pulled up, and it's kind of like, well, you could sort of cash in and say, oh, I guess this is not for me. Or you can use that as this motivation to get better. And when you we'll get into where it all went for you, but seeing you now as a head coach, sometimes out of our biggest disappointments come some of the best things.
Hmm.
So obviously you work hard, you get to that senior year. What was senior year like? You know, football. I know that you may have set a record that you can tell us about, and then basketball. And what is that senior year like for you, and how do you begin thinking about college?
Yeah. So senior year was, like I said, sophomore year into sophomore year, I really started to hone my craft for basketball. And junior year, I had a really good season. I actually didn't play football my sophomore or junior year. But as kind of a side story, I always liked football, but to be completely honest, I just hated getting hit. I was one of those kids that just did not like getting hit. So I didn't play sophomore, junior year. Also, my freshman year when I played, I didn't get a ton of playing time. And it was something like, well, I don't love getting hit. And if I'm not playing a lot, maybe I'm not going to commit to it, which is kind of the opposite way of adversity, when I talk about basketball. But um, that's a whole nother story. But anyways, going into my senior year, my best friend was the quarterback. He was a 4-year starting quarterback, really good player. Ended up going to play at Northern State for 4 years, which is a Division II school in South Dakota. So really good player. And he texted me after their junior season ended. He's like, you're coming out senior year. He's like, basically didn't give me a choice. He said, you're going to be a wide receiver. And so I was like, well, I it's my senior year. I want to do whatever I can. And he was like my best friend. So I was like, why not? Let's go do it. And so, I had a really good season in football, and I broke the single season record for receptions and receiving yards for our school. To be fair, our school isn't I went to St. Francis High School. We weren't exactly a throwing powerhouse. Our best seasons before were always when we had some really good running backs. So, and then having a 4-year starting quarterback who was like the district player quarterback of the year, he makes my life easy. So it's not like I was doing too much out there. He was giving me the ball where I could make some plays.
But you had to catch it, so
Yes. Yep. Exactly. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, going into senior year, my whole mindset was, and we're going to obviously get into the faith aspect too, but this is kind of where I learned a lot about my faith. Was going into my senior year, I was kind of thinking, sophomore, junior year, I'm like, all right, senior year, this is going to be like my school. Like I'm going to be the stud football player, really good basketball player. And it's like, this is going to be quote unquote my school. Your senior year, you want to be the man, all those things. And I really built my identity looking back on that whole idea of, having this unbelievable senior year and whatnot. For basketball, my sophomore and junior year, we made it to state both years. Really good teams, like I mentioned before, the senior class my sophomore year, and then we had another really good senior class when I was a junior that helped us get to state. And so I was like, well, obviously we're going to go back to state my senior year. And so put a lot of effort in, put a lot of work in as well. But unfortunately, we kind of heartbreaking ends to the season, both for football and basketball. Football, we played our rival Andover in the section final. We had a really good team. We just came up basically like one play short against Andover. So we lost in football in the section final, and then in the section semifinal, for basketball, we also lost that year. And what was an upset, and basically it was like a buzzer beater upset. And so it was, tough ways to end. And I kind of looked at it after, and I was like, man, I really built my identity on the success that I would have on the court, on the field, being the best player, all of these things. And it was like, man, it was just such an empty feeling from there. And I'm sure we'll get to the faith aspect too, and how I kind of grew in my faith. But just the lesson I learned there was, at the time, I didn't learn this lesson. I was still a senior in high school and I was just upset, really upset with how everything ended. But I was like, man, there is just so much more to life than the performance that you have on a day-to-day basis on the field and the court. And what you put your identity in and is going to make you feel so much better. And you're going to have so much more self-worth based on what you put that identity in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When you identify in your performance, you may have some highs, but that only lasts so long and you have to repeat it. And then when you have a low, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm worthless. And we'll get into it, but putting your identity in Christ frees you from that. And man, that's such a good word. So what is the search like?
Yeah. So my college search was actually pretty simple. So it's funny. I was a pretty good basketball player in high school, and I really wanted to play basketball in college. Once I committed to it between sophomore and junior year, really committed. And from there I was like, I think I want to give this a shot. I'm going to go and try and play college basketball. And luckily when I was a junior, we had a couple pretty good seniors as well who were college basketball players, and Bethel had come. There's other schools, but Bethel specifically, I remember them coming and they were recruiting these two guys who were seniors when I was a junior. Neither of them went to Bethel, but I kind of got to meet the coach just at practices and stuff like that and at games. And then my senior year, they started recruiting me. I got a couple letters from Bethel. They were really the school that came after me the hardest, I would say. And at Division III level 2, you kind of have to recruit yourself in a sense. Like you have to actually make the effort to get back to them and make sure you're reaching out to these coaches as well. So yeah, it was the head assistant at Bethel at the time, Jed Mosman, Coach Mosman. He was recruiting me, and and I came on campus, and I was looking at a couple of different schools, kind of considering Bethel, maybe St. John's, a couple of UMAC schools were recruiting me as well. And I just I stepped on campus for a visit at Bethel, and I don't know if it was fall break or something, because there wasn't many students on campus, but I could just feel the Holy Spirit pulling me to Bethel. It was funny because I remember going to fall leagues at Bethel, playing in kind of their secondary gymnasium, the SRC, we call it, the rec center. And the courts are just older. They're not, not exactly the nicest looking place. But it's like where you play fall league. And I was like, I would never come to this school. I remember saying in high school, like, why would I ever come here? And it's funny just how the Lord works in just mysterious ways. Cause immediately when I stepped on campus, I'm like, wow, I can totally feel God pulling me. Like he wants me here. And basically right after that I committed. So that was kind of the journey.
It's cool because you said their coaches initially came to see your teammates. And right there, I think is such a word of you never know who's watching and giving your best all the time. Someone comes to see your teammate and they notice you. That actually is funny. That's how my wife ended up at Bethel. Same thing with hockey. But yeah, you never know what opportunity is going to come, who may be watching. So you shouldn't just, the coach is coming to watch me, I'm going to play my best. It's like you have to always give it your all, and make that who you are. And then the good things will come.
Yep. Yeah, no, we, I can't remember who the first coach was that told me this, but a couple of coaches have reiterated it throughout my life. But it was basically, every single practice, play, sport, activity, anything you do, whether it's in the classroom, on the field, on the court, is an interview. Basically, you are like, someone is always kind of watching, and whether they know it, whether you know it or not, they're taking notes on you. Whether that's your first experience. So like you said, like every single interaction you have is important because you want them to see, and I'm sure we'll get into this later too, but you want to be a light for Christ. And I think every single opportunity, you're not always going to be at your tip top. You're not always going to be super happy, or you might be having a tough day, but just the ability to specifically on the sports side, to play your hardest or give it your all, people notice that, even when you're not necessarily making every shot or, having your best game on the field, whatever it may be. If you're giving it your all, people are going to notice that. So,
yeah. And that's such a way beyond sports thing. Like when it comes to trying to get a job and trying to get promoted, or, who's going to write your recommendation? Who's going to want to promote you if they don't see that daily, that effort? So, man, that's good. So you land at Bethel. Take us through kind of the glory days. When do you see the court, and what's it like?
Yeah. So, I was in a unique spot while I was at Bethel for my 4 years. So I got there in 2016, the fall of 2016, and we had a really, really good team that year. Three really good, one junior and then two senior guards, and all three of them were just ridiculous. Like basically, we were playing with 3 point guards on the court, and if you played basketball before, like a point guard is so important, and to have 3 of them on the court at the same time is a luxury. And so that team was really, really special. And I was lucky enough at Bethel, we had a varsity and a JV. I was blessed enough to, I coming in freshman year, I never expected to play a lot or even get any minutes. And, I was basically coming in, I'm like, I'm going to work my butt off, practice as hard as I can, and try and make the guys around me better. And luckily enough, the coach gave me a spot on the varsity bench. Like I said, never got meaningful minutes, but it was just a blessing to be able to, be around those upperclassmen and learn from them. Just the way they went about, day to day, how they took practice, how serious they took it, how serious they took, their craft, working on their game every single day. So that was a blessing freshman year. And we had a really good team. We ended up winning the MIAC conference championship in the playoffs. And I can't remember when the last time we had won. I want to say it had been, around 30 years since we had won a conference championship before then, 20 or 30 years, something like that. And so that was really special. Made it to the national NCAA tournament. We lost in the first round. Actually, I want to say it was triple overtime. It was either double or triple overtime to River Falls. But it was such a special team. And I learned so much that year, not only on the court stuff, but just connecting with those guys and just learning what college basketball is like. So that was a lot of fun. From there, sophomore year, we had a really talented team again. We ended up losing in the conference championship, but another really good season. And then junior and senior year, good teams as well. We made it to the MIAC playoffs. We were never able to, reach as far as we did that freshman year, but still really good teams every single year I was there. We had a lot of talent. I was lucky enough to come in with a couple other really, really talented freshmen my freshman year. And so the reason why I say I was kind of in a unique position at Bethel is because I started one game my entire career. My senior year started one game. But besides that, I really was never a consistent guy in the rotation. I was always kind of in that gray area, if you want to call it, basically anywhere between the 7th man. So, or between the 7th man and the 9th man, basically. So 2nd, 3rd, or 4th guy off the bench, depending on what we needed. And so there were some games where I wouldn't play, it might be like a month where I didn't play, and then I'd randomly get in and I'd be playing 15, 20 minutes in the game. So it was a unique position because, I kind of look back on my college career and I was what some would say like a utility player. I kind of did whatever was needed by the team. I was basically, our coaches laughed because I would basically play 1 through 4, point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, kind of the backup in all those spots. So it's like a blessing and a curse because I think I helped the team in a lot of ways, but I was never, great at one specific thing. I was just really good at different things. And so it was unique. And I learned, what it was like to be able to contribute to the team without necessarily being on the court all the time, which was a hard thing to go through. I'm not saying it was easy at all. There's times where I grew bitter. I was upset, kind of just didn't understand necessarily why I wasn't playing sometimes. But it was a really, really good lesson for me to learn, you can contribute in so many ways and you can use your talents and the gifts that God gave you in other ways besides necessarily scoring the ball or being on the court to give the assist or get the rebound. You can still contribute while you're on the bench to your teammates.
Yeah, it's easy to get an attitude on the bench too,
Hmm.
but I'm guessing that wasn't you because there were certain games that you played 15 minutes, right? And
Hmm.
if you're on the bench and you get an attitude, you're not gonna be the guy that is getting in.
Yeah. Hmm. And I don't want to, there were some times where I did get an attitude, but it wasn't something that I let, I tried not to let stick around too much. Like it's just the human tendencies to say, well, you kind of playing that comparison game. Well, why am I not out there? I'm better than him at this and this. So, I don't want to say, all 4 years I was this picture perfect teammate where I was always, standing up and cheering and never had an attitude. But I will say, as I grew older into my college career and gained more experience, just playing college basketball, I understood that it was more than just the five guys on the court, that it really took a whole team. And that was what made my freshman year so special is I think literally all the guys from, our top two or three guys to the bottom guys on the bench, we all contributed and we really, really committed to our role. I remember, we had my freshman year, I was on like the scout team or, all defense team, whatever it was, in practice, we were playing defense the whole time, basically. And there was five, sometimes six of us, but we took pride in our practices. We were like, all right, we're going to come out here and we're going to defend our butts off. We're going to play really, really good defense on these guys because we want to make these starters better. So, like you said, not having that attitude and being able to humble yourself and say, all right, I can still commit and help this team get better is really important.
Yeah. What's cool too, they say sometimes the most naturally talented or gifted people don't actually make the best coach because if it comes so naturally to you, you don't necessarily have to figure out how do I get better. And for you, even the fact that you played four positions
Mhm.
out of five, um, I'm sure, and you can speak to it, but I'm sure that has equipped you to coach in amazing ways. So tell us before we get into your coaching journey, you did win the MIAC Elite 22 award.
Oh yeah.
Tell us what that is.
Yeah, so that was my sophomore year actually. I was blessed enough to win that award. And that's basically they take all of the athletes who are participating in the MIAC championship that year. So we made it to the MIAC championship, played Augsburg. Like I said, we ended up losing that time my sophomore year, but they basically take the athlete that is in the rotation basically, and they have the best grade point average. So I can't remember what my grade point average was my sophomore year, but it was a pretty high grade point average. And then like I kind of said, I was like the seventh or eighth man, so I was getting minutes, and so contributing to the one of the conference championship teams, and then also doing well in the classroom. So I do take pride in that, just because it shows I'm committed to both in the classroom, on the court. Always doing my best, not just trying to be the best basketball player, but also trying to be the best student I can possibly be. So yeah, that was pretty cool to have that award and accept that award.
Yeah, and there's a quote that I like. It says, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Mm.
And it's not about compartmentalizing your life, but it's about building your character
Mm-hmm.
and being the best student you can be, being the best athlete you can be, now being the best employee you can be, the best coach, someday being the best husband, the best father, the best community member. Yeah, that that is such a word. I remember kind of feeling when I was younger, like you can almost separate it and, oh, I just want to be the best
Mm-hmm.
athlete, but doing my chores or whatever, how I treat people or whatever, it's not that important. And like, man, it's so much bigger than that. It's all of it.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So coming into senior year, how are you deciding what you want to do, and how does that lead you into coaching? If you're finding this podcast valuable, take a second to leave a review, to follow on whatever platform you're listening on. This will help the podcast reach more people. Check us out at 1020words.com/DYA, TEN20words.com/DYA. You can check out our merchandise. We have sweatpants, hoodies, t-shirts, shorts. Use code all caps DYA20 and take 20% off. There's also a button where you can support on Patreon, follow on Instagram at Dear Young Athlete, or inquire about being on the podcast or bringing Dear Young Athlete to your team or group. We hope to see you there. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah. So coming into senior year at Bethel, I was a business finance major, and kind of realized end of my junior year, beginning of my senior year, I didn't really want to do much with finance. I didn't really want to work, at a bank or a financial institute, and just sit behind a desk and crunch numbers on a spreadsheet. Not saying that, all the jobs are like that, but I kind of was, hungry for something more than that, kind of interacting with people, maybe mentoring people. And I also had a leadership studies minor, and I love those classes. So, being a leader, being able to mentor maybe kids younger than me, those are always things that I kind of realized were like passions of mine. And also just, I wanted to like build on those things, and I wanted to do something with those things. And so first year out of college, I graduated in 2020. So that was right when COVID hit. COVID hit in March, and then I graduated in May of 2020, and there wasn't a lot of jobs open that I was, really interested in. So I ended up I was a business analyst for about a year at this company that actually owns like 10 bowling alleys. Interesting job. I learned a lot. But I was like, this is something I really see myself doing for a long time. And actually, it's funny that you say, you're like, all of the interactions you have are important because they can lead to job interviews down the road, letters of recommendation. And how I got into the role that I'm in now, there was one of my coaches from Bethel who actually was the one that started recruiting me. So I'd known him since I was, 16 years old. He had actually left Bethel and became the athletic director at New Life Academy, which is the school that I'm at now. He became the athletic director, and then his assistant, or sort of his assistant, it's not exactly an assistant athletic director, it's called the youth activities manager. They had left about 2 years ago now. And right after they left, he shot me a text message and just said, "Hey, would you be interested in this role? I think you'd be great at it." And that was exactly what I wanted to get into. I want to, eventually down the line, become an athletic director myself. And I thought this was a perfect role to kind of step into that. And so, I'm able to use my leadership studies minor. I've used a lot of that actually just in my day-to-day job, my full-time job here. And essentially it's like an assistant athletic director. But from that, a couple months later, so I got the job here in April, and then it was about 2, maybe 3 months later, I can't remember if it was in June, maybe, the basketball coach here at New Life Academy, he had decided to leave. He just had some other things going on. I think some family stuff. He had a couple of young kids, and he decided to leave. And so the job was open, and through some convincing of my athletic director, who used to be my assistant coach at Bethel, I decided to apply for it. And I was just like, sure, I love coaching. I was planning to coach here anyways, but not necessarily varsity. It was a little scary to think about, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized, the ability to lead and mentor young men as the basketball coach every single day is something that just fits perfectly with what the passions that I do have and the passions that God has put in my heart. Like, I love basketball. I'm a basketball junkie. I could watch college basketball, NBA, high school basketball. I could watch it all the time. I love breaking it down. But more than that, I love mentoring young men and helping them kind of go through this, what I think is one of the most important stages of life, middle school and high school, because I think there's just so much that you form in the habits that you do at that age. It just creates so many bridges, it can either burn or you can build bridges to your future self. And so I think, the ability to pour into these guys every single day and lead and mentor them, and then also be able to play basketball with them, coach them in basketball, is just two things that I think are perfect. And so that's kind of how I got into the role that I'm in right now, both full-time at the school and also being able to coach basketball at the school. So totally a God thing with the timing and how all that worked out. Although it basically started since I was 16 years old, meeting who was soon to be my assistant coach at Bethel, and then my boss here at New Life Academy.
Man, and it's so cool the way that you carry yourself is so important, like you said, and like we said earlier, and you've essentially got two jobs that you didn't even have to apply for. It was, I'm sure you filled out the paperwork, but
yeah,
it was like, oh, you have somebody in leadership that says, I remember coaching Robbie. I remember what he was like. I want him to have this job. And then the basketball job becomes available, and it's like, okay, well, he's the guy I want. And it can be hard to just think in that big picture every day, but I just think the more you can remember that, and it's not about trying to get and trying to receive, like, oh, I'm gonna work hard so that I receive some future blessing, but it's just about who you are. And when you focus on who you are, the right things will come, even if it's not what we envision, it's not how we pictured it. You probably pictured going to Bethel and being a 3-year starter and scoring 25 a game, and it's just like that didn't happen, but you can look back and just see like God's hand guiding you, which is super cool.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely can. It's so funny to look back at all of the little things throughout my life. And specifically, like you talk about at Bethel, it was like, well, yeah, I was upset at the time that I wasn't getting as much playing time, but because I wasn't getting as much playing time, because I was on the bench, which led me to kind of just see the game more. Like my whole thing was, all right, if I'm going to be on the bench, well, I'm going to study the scouting report. I'm going to remember that, oh, when this guy does, he's set up here in the corner, they're going to be running this play, whatever that may be. So the ability to kind of understand that and then share that with my teammates. Well, looking back on it, I realize now, like, that was preparing me to become a coach. Because that's exactly what we do as coaches. We study the tape, we study the scouting reports. And then from there, we share that information with, our players. And I was doing the exact same thing, but just as a player on the bench. And so I think, like you said, God was totally ordering my steps and to lead me to where I'm right now, which is such a cool blessing to see. Because it's like, all right, I know that this is where God wants me to be right now.
Man, so transitioning a little bit, pivoting, you've told us kind of your journey through playing sports, becoming a coach, and you've alluded to your faith journey. So if you can take us there, kind of what does faith look like growing up? What are some key moments for you?
Yeah. So growing up, my family, my household, we didn't go to church when I was young. So I didn't necessarily grow up in the traditional Christian household. Like you hear a lot of people that, go to Bethel or Northwestern share, which is great, but that just wasn't my experience growing up. But then actually going into, it was the summer after 6th grade, I believe it was. It was in 6th grade or summer after 6th grade, playing baseball. I'm going to share this part. It may not make sense right now, my faith journey, why am I talking about baseball, but it will in a second. So I made the B team my 6th grade year of baseball. Really upset about it. I remember coming home and crying to my mom, like, why did I make the B team? I was on the A team the last year, and I thought I had a really good season. And it's like, why did I make the B team? I was really upset. So whatever, I come to practice the first day, and there's a kid on the team who he had just moved from Wisconsin, actually. It was probably 2 weeks prior. And so he had missed tryouts. And so he got placed on the B team. He's a really good player. He would have made the A team, if he would have been there for tryouts, but he missed tryouts and they had a full team already. So he got put on the B team. Well, this friend that moved in quickly became my, one of my best friends, and his family actually went to church, and he invited me to come to Sunday school with him. And they went to Bethlehem Baptist Church. So I ended up going with them to the North Campus there in Arden Hills, and went to Sunday school, really enjoyed it. My mom started going to services with their parents, which was really, really cool. So we became pretty good family friends with them. And through that, I remember that following summer. So that's why I say the summer after 6th grade. I can't remember where the camp was exactly now, which is silly. Like, how do you not remember this? But anyways, go to summer camp with Bethlehem Baptist Church and end up giving my life up to the Lord, committing my life to Jesus Christ. I remember sitting at a picnic table with one of the counselors and just praying that Jesus would come into my life and I'd give my life to him, which was such a special and unique moment. And then from there, it was all roses. No, as I'm sure a ton of your guests have shared, after that moment, it didn't become super easy always or super clear. But I just started to try and make faith more of my own from that point on. I tried to read the Bible more, tried to pray every day. And early on, it wasn't necessarily the easiest thing. It wasn't necessarily like a natural habit for me to do every single day, but I started to build on those habits, and kind of going into my senior year, I basically had still friends with the family that brought us to Bethlehem Baptist Church, but actually through kind of which is definitely like a God's coincidence. It's a super long story. Basically found out that I had family who was running a church out of Brooklyn Center. It was actually a really small church called Power Source Ministries. I met this is basically like my second cousin. So they're cousins of my dad. And growing up, this was, I can share this now because he's 10 years sober, but my dad was an alcoholic when I was growing up. And through him actually being an alcoholic, one of his cousins had reached out to him and was like, hey man, you gotta, figure this out. And this was when I was in like 7th or 8th grade. So just after I, committed my life to the Lord. But anyways, through that experience of my dad, one of my cousins reaching out to my dad, I'd met them, ended up going to church there. And I, met met my family, which was obviously super cool. Second cousins who have since become some of my best friends. And they obviously helped my dad become sober. He was admitted to Christ Recovery Center, which is a downtown through the Union Gospel Mission, which was really cool. And so I think that was another key moment in my life, because it made me realize, like my dad's alcoholism wasn't something that he could just cure on his own. That was 100% God doing all of the work on that. Jesus Christ doing all the work, and he would echo those words too. And so it was really cool to see that, Jesus doing a pretty huge miracle in my life. He saved my dad's life basically. So from there, started going to church at Power Source Ministries, ended up committing to Bethel. This all kind of coincides. It went from basically, it was like in high school, I should say, I went to Power Source Ministries. So 9th grade, I started going there, committed to Bethel. And from there, I was able to, get involved with some smaller groups, some like Bible studies on Thursday nights with a group called Rise Up. And it really helped me develop my faith and make it my own. And, it's not always easy. There's times where I question things that God does in my life. I'm not always happy with certain things that happen, but throughout it all, I realize that he's in control and he's a good God, which gives me joy, because, I know that, even when I'm not having the best day, or work's not going good, or basketball's been frustrating, coaching hasn't been great, whatever it may be, I know that God is in control, and that he gives me joy because I have breath. I have the ability to breathe and live every single day and be able to pour into these kids and do a job that I really love. And so it's been a fun journey, throughout, since I was in 6th, 7th grade there, when I first committed my life to the Lord. It's been a really, really cool journey because I just see God ordering my steps, whether that would be, obviously meeting my best friend who took me to church which eventually led to me giving up my life to the Lord, to meeting family members who, through that, I continued to grow in my faith. And then once I got to high school, it was like, well, God clearly was leading me to Bethel because he wanted me to grow in my faith even more. Because there was just no way I was going to go to Bethel without all of those things before happening.
Right.
And so it's just been really cool to see. And then obviously from there, I met my assistant coach who became the athletic director, and then I ended up getting this role that I have right here. So it's like you look back on all of these things that God did. And like, that's why it's so easy for me to give all the glory to God, is because I would not be anywhere near where I am right now. I might be doing something completely different, not really exploring my passions that God, put on my heart since I was in 6th and 7th grade.
Yeah. Man, I love it. The big idea behind this podcast is the way that God is at work within even sports.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid, it almost felt for me like, well, am I going to be a church person or an athlete? Like, it didn't feel like there was this crossover.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I've grown, the more I see God at work in all areas of life, whether it be sports, whether it be music, whether it be, even business and I love your story of this friend just happened to move, just happened to get put on the B team, even
Mm-hmm.
though he should have been on the A team. And then it's like God clearly is working through all these things. And like, you don't have to choose, oh, am I gonna be a musician or a Christian? Am I gonna be an athlete or a Christian? Business, church. It's like it's just about surrendering, like you said, to God in whatever it is that you do, that you're passionate about, that you're even gifted in, that you enjoy, allowing God to work in that and through that. So now, you're a head coach, you have been pursuing your faith. How do you see that coinciding now? What does it mean to you now to follow Jesus, and what does it mean to you to be a coach?
Yeah. Like you kind of touched on it. Growing up, I was kind of had the same mindset. Like, well, if I'm going to be a really good athlete, I can't really be a Christian, or I kind of have to join one or the other. I can be like the kind of like how I grew up, which is totally not the way it is, but it's like, well, am I going to be like this nerdy kind of geek, Bible person who just knows every single Bible verse and they don't really have any, like, I don't really like hanging out with them that much? Or am I going to be this athlete that, I connect with these guys more and I have more fun with these guys, whatever it may be, which is so wrong completely. Looking back on it, it's like, oh, I was clearly just kind of a dumb idiot high schooler who didn't really understand, God's purpose and plan. So it's cool now to be able to be in a spot. I'm blessed to be at a Christian school, so I'm able to share every single day with our guys a message, whether that be just one verse and we speak about it and what that means, or just lessons every single day and relating it to the Bible and relating to somewhere in the Bible. So it's a unique opportunity because you really can. I mean, it's not one or the other. It's a Christian lives that out every single part of their life, even if it's not specifically sharing a Bible verse or something you heard at church, but just being a light to these young men, being able to pour into them and say to them like, hey, I was in your shoes, 6, 8, 10 years ago, whatever it may be. I remember being in your shoes and going through all the struggles of whether it be not just the basketball court, but struggling in school, if there's a hard class that I'm struggling with, or girl problems or friend problems, whatever it may be. I remember that. And so I want to be able to pour into you, but I want to be able to pour into you with the Christian perspective of understanding that there's a greater plan to all of this, and that basketball is great, sports are great, but it's kind of what we take from them, and how we let God kind of use us in these sports to be light for other people, for non-believers across the world.
Yeah. I love how you shared too, like you gave your life to Christ in sixth, seventh grade. And you jokes like then it was all good, all roses.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that you mentioned that, because following Christ is not about no longer having pain or suffering or challenges. In my life, I've had way more challenges and suffering as a believer than I ever did before. But it's about having an anchor and a guide through that. Even like you said about the identity, it's like my identity no longer is defined in my highs and my lows, but I have a solid anchor. And that I can embrace and I can enjoy my highs and I can celebrate without it getting to my head. And I can go through the valley without giving up hope. And man, that's good. You also reminded me of this kid in the town that I grew up. And I played hockey, and hockey has a reputation kind of for being like the hockey locker room is like whatever.
Yep.
And this kid, would be in the hockey locker room with everyone, like whether you're talking dirty or cussing or talking about girls or whatever. And he'd be like, guys, cut it out. He was a Christian and he was not ashamed to be like, hey guys, like that's not cool. Stop. But he also was the best hockey player in the town. So it's like everyone, respected him. And that just speaks to not choosing, oh, I'm going to be a Christian, or I'm going to be like, you could be the best. And you don't have to, it's not about how good you are, but you can be the very best. And you can be unashamed of your faith. I'm a big Tim Tebow fan. National championships, Heisman, not afraid, not ashamed of his faith.
Yep.
And the list could go on. But tell us, transitioning again, we learn so many lessons about life and sports. If you could pick one lesson from sports that you've seen applied and impacting your life, what would be that one lesson?
Yeah, I think I would, I've touched on this, when I was talking about at Bethel, and not necessarily playing. So I've kind of already said this, but basically the lesson or the idea that you can contribute to the team, the organization, whatever it may be, even in ways that you don't necessarily think are the most valuable, it's still very valuable, whatever way you can contribute. You have special traits and talents that God has specifically given to you. And even if those traits or talents, in sports, and maybe, who, like in basketball specifically, who can jump the highest, who has the best looking shot, who can knock down the most 3-pointers, who's the best dribbler. Even if you don't necessarily have those talents per se, you can still make amazing contributions to the team with just your ability to work hard and never quit. Those are like two things you can always control. Whether we talked about this quite a bit at Bethel, actually, was, the ability to you show up every single day. And I remember our weight room coach talked about it a little bit too, but it's just the ability to show up is such an important skill. And some people who have, the skills, like I said, jumping high, really good shooter, they're not always showing up every single day. They can rely on those natural skills and abilities that they've been given, but also the people that don't have those skills and they just show up every single day, work hard, kind of put their head down, and contribute in whatever way they can. Those people are just as important to the team as the quote unquote star players. And so I think the lesson that I've learned is you have skills and abilities that can contribute to anything that you're doing, even if it's not necessarily what the newspaper is going to write about or you're going to see on social media. So yeah, that I think that would be the most important lesson that I've learned.
Yeah, man, that's so good. So, I mean, like, I watch most Vikings games and I can't name our O-line, like everyone knows Kirk Cousins, Devin Cook, Justin Jefferson, but they wouldn't be anything without those O-linemen. And even if we don't know who they are, they're not on fantasy football, and they make a significant contribution. So that's good. Amen to that. And as we close, you are on the Dear Young Athlete podcast. So as we do in every episode, we need you to complete the statement for us. Dear young athlete, what would you say to your players, to a younger Robbie?
All right. So I had this kind of written before. I was thinking through it. So I hope it's okay that I have more than just like one sentence. It won't be super long, but so here we go. Dear young athlete, you are strong, capable, and loved by a God that knows your unique and special traits. He has a specific purpose and plan for you. So understand and know that your identity and self-worth is so much more than how you perform on the athletic field or court. Find the passions that God has placed on your heart and pursue them wholeheartedly for the rest of your life. And so that's my statement. I'm just going to kind of go off of that. Is
freestyle.
So I kind of found my passions that God placed in my heart, and I touched on it before, but mentorship, leadership, basketball, being around young men and women, and being able to pour into them and help them grow into servants of Christ. That's totally my passion, and so I'm going to wholeheartedly pursue that the rest of my life. Even if it's not in this specific role that I'm in right now, I'm still going to pursue that the rest of my life. And so once you find those passions, because God has placed passions on each of our hearts, sort of like you're doing right now, JT, like with this podcast, is so awesome to see, because you're pursuing your passions as well. Even if it's not in the ways we, completely thought when we were younger, through sports or whatever it may be, we're still pursuing these passions that God has placed on our hearts. And that's how we honor him and give the glory to him. So
amen. That's perfect.
Awesome.
Well, Robbie, it's been an honor, a pleasure. Man, more than I could have expected. This episode just will be, like I said in the beginning, such an encouragement. Do you have any last words for us?
No, thank you guys. Thank you for having me on, and I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of share my story and share what Jesus Christ has been doing in my life. So thank you so much.
Amen. All right. Later.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dear Young Athlete podcast. Remember to follow on your platform and leave us a review. Check out our website linked in the description, 1020words.com/DYA. Use code all caps DYA20 and take 20% off the merchandise. We'll see you in the next episode.